Thank you everyone for coming to jointly meet up between the Chicago Downtown Azure meetup group and the Chicago.net mobile developers meetup group. So one of the things we're trying to do across the mobile space and across the technology space is to try and cooperate between the different groups where there's synergy and there's crossover, so that we can the communities can get to know each other better, and we can all benefit from it. So this is the first one that I think both groups have been involved in like this. So it's great to see such a good turnout. And yeah, thank you for coming along. And first of all, I'd like to thank 10th Magnitude, who are the sponsors of the Azure Meetup group, and do most of the organisation for that. So they sponsored today's event. So thank you very much, and I'd like to invite Shannon to come up and tell us a little bit about them.
Oh, very little bit. But yeah, hi, I'm Shannon. I also organize the Azure Meetup group, the Downtown Chicago Azure Meetup group. So David said most of it already. We're super psyched to be doing a joint one here today. But 10th Magnitude is a sponsor of the Azure Meetup group, and we are a cloud consulting firm that focuses entirely on Azure. So hence the connection. And I was going to say a few more things. Actually, Matt, I don't know if Matt did you want to get to it, or want me to just go on up here?
Whatever you would like to do.
There's a few other events here going on. So I know I'll be posting all this stuff in our meetup group message, or the group board. So you can check it out there. But I know Matt and I are organizers of the DevOps Day Chicago event that's coming up in October, and we just found out that we've got a special code.
Okay.
If you, do you have
okay,
anything to say?
So so real quick for people who don't know, so DevOps Days is an international conference that started 5 years ago. This is the first one that will be in Chicago. It's only the second one in the Midwest. So it's a relatively small, it's not like thousands of people kind of thing. It's both speakers, single track speaker plus open spaces, talking about DevOps kind of things. So we have a code for people attending, so it's, and we'll send this out.
We'll send it
out.
We'll
send it, but if you want to memorize it, it's Azure_CloudGate. We'll get you 10% off your registration. The other thing is our calls for papers or proposals. I never remember what that means. Suggestion, if you want to propose a talk, technically that is ending tomorrow, but magically we're going to extend it a week. So definitely check it out. If you go to devopsdays.org, you'll see the link to click for Chicago. There's about 35 talks proposed so far. So also, even if you don't want to give a talk, take a look. You can leave comments, give us some feedback for talks and things like that. Check it out.
Yeah, so DevOps Days and 10th Magnitude, if you're interested, we're always hiring, so check us out.
If you like DevOps, listen to our Rest of DevOps podcast.
Those are our pitches. But without further ado, I will turn it over to Tim and David and Nate to go ahead and start here. Actually, I will say really quickly too, there's some surveys here. At the end, we're going to be giving out a discount code to Azure Watch, which is another one of our sponsors over at the Chicago Azure Meetup. So they are a monitoring service for Microsoft Azure. So we're going to give out a promo code for, I think it's like a free month or free, it's like a usage code. So if you fill out the survey and just hand it off to me at the end, I'll go ahead and draw and I'll email you. I'll announce the winner and then email you the code. So that's it. Now it's really handing it off.
Okay. Thank you very much, Shannon. I'll just give you a run over of the agenda, how we're going to handle this, because really there's sort of two interrelated topics here. So first of all, I'm going to give you a short introduction to Xamarin for those of you that don't know much about it. Then Tim from Microsoft is going to basically give us an introduction to Azure, an introduction to Azure Mobile Services, and then he's going to show everyone basically how to set up a simple service and demo doing that. And then I'll come back and finish off the presentation showing you some Xamarin code that will basically interact with that using the Azure Mobile Services API for Xamarin. which makes it extremely easy to do simple interactions with your backend service. So, Xamarin. Xamarin is a way to develop native Android, iOS, and Windows Phone apps using C# and .NET framework for Android and iOS. It provides C# wrappers around all the native APIs that form part of the Android and the iOS SDKs. And what that does is allows, obviously, developers to reach all the major mobile platforms, not BlackBerry, unfortunately, but, you know, they've just got they're small in the States, quite large outside the States, but they're not supported. And what it does, it provides you with a native user interface, it gives you native performance, and it gives you shared code across all the platforms. And you get to use the great .NET framework and, you know, C#, which is a great language. I mean, everyone here should be familiar with those. So let's take a look at the approaches of doing cross-platform development. Cross-platform development is a big headache for anyone involved in mobile apps. You know, the last thing you want to do is develop disparate code for the various platforms. And that's the approach that most companies use right now. They use this siloed approach where, you know, you basically have a team that develops for iPhone, for iOS, a team that develops for Android, maybe a team that develops for Windows Phone. And for anyone that's got more than one different device, you'll see the same app. You know, they don't match. Even the functionality doesn't match because the teams are out of sync. They're working slightly differently. You get different experiences on them that, you know, outside of the general experience of the device. And it's expensive to do it that way because you have to maintain 2 or more teams to do this. Another approach which some companies try is, you know, the write once, run anywhere approach, which basically uses normally HTML5 and JavaScript. And it's, you know, the idea of having what's known as web apps. The problem with these is that you end up basically pandering to the lowest common denominator in a given situation. With the browsers, you have fragmentation. None of the browsers out there are truly HTML5 compliant, and all handle things slightly differently. You end up developing a design basic for one of the platforms, and it never looks right on the others. And you don't really get a native look and feel. You know, users are used to their iPhone apps looking a certain way and being controlled in a certain way, and their Android apps being interacted with in a certain way, and it's very difficult to achieve that with web apps. And then on top of that, there are some potential, in some cases, significant performance issues. It's notable that you know, Facebook and LinkedIn, and there's a couple of others that basically went down this route, actually ended up deciding against it and going back to using native apps, and they ended up with the siloed approach because they were getting significant performance issues. And in their cases, it's because of lists. HTML5 does, and JavaScript does not handle lists very well. So if you code sharing, okay, code sharing accelerates development. Using this approach, you can get up to about 90% code reuse across the devices, depending on the project. Obviously, it's a very lightweight project, which basically, you know, a GUI with a few screens on it, and it's not doing anything else. You're not going to get that much code reuse. If it's a heavyweight enterprise solution where you're accessing databases, you're accessing services across the web, you're doing number crunching, those sort of things, you're going to get a large amount of reuse. You can also leverage existing libraries. There's a lot of existing libraries out there, you know, anything that's C#, in C#, or you can pull in, and of course you can pull in, you know, anything that's C or C++. In fact, anything that any unmanaged code actually can be pulled in. It just has to be compiled for multiple times, you know, for each of the platforms. And one of the nice things is it's fully integrated with NuGet. So if you have a library, you put it up into NuGet, you can share it across your team. That way, just, you know, you just reference it in your solution, in your projects, and it will tell you, hey, download this, and you can do that from within the IDE, and it becomes very easy to do. You don't have to muck around doing NuGet commands and all that sort of thing. It also has great support for portable glass libraries. This is relatively new. There was a way of getting this to happen through sort of manually editing project and header files and things like this. Now the support is officially here. For those of you who haven't used PCLs, they're really good. You get one assembly that's used across multiple platforms. You tell it what platforms when you create it, which platforms it's going to support, and it basically sorts out the information that platform requires to be able to use it. One thing to note, though, they are pure .NET. There cannot be any platform-dependent code in there. It has to be pure vanilla .NET. Yeah, so there's some centralized code sharing. Basically, it works out of the box. You can use NuGet to share those PCLs, and there are a lot of libraries out there that do that. And it works, and it's really, really good. Very, very powerful. And if you start using it, you'll love those. It also supports shared projects or shared libraries. These were introduced by Microsoft at Build this year. And they support the concept of universal apps. So Microsoft came along and said, hey, we want you to be able to develop one code set for Windows and to go in the Windows Store, Windows apps and Windows phones, and we're going to try and help you do that. And Xamarin basically supports that concept as well. Basically allows libraries which implement platform-specific calls and behavior to be differentiated at build time. And I'm not going to go into details of how that is done. It's supported from Visual Studio 2003 Update 2 onwards, and also in Xamarin Studio with Xamarin 3. And it can be used in conjunction with PCLs. However, there is one caveat if anyone goes down that route. The way that these are set up, you basically have a root shared library and then another shared library that's linked to it for each of the platforms. You can reference PCLs. In fact, you can reference anything from the device-specific versions of the shared library, but not from the root one. It's a little bit of a drawback, and I might have got this one. There might be a way to do it. I couldn't find how to do that. So I think, in my personal opinion, I think most people that are going to be doing cross-platforms, especially using Xamarin, will end up just creating projects, separate projects, and basically sharing them between each other manually rather than using this feature. So Microsoft and Xamarin are partnered globally now. For a time there was people wondering, well, these companies that are doing these sort of things, are they going to be around very long? How much support do they get? Do they have? Well, you don't get much bigger than Microsoft, and Microsoft sees Xamarin as a strategic partner, and so they're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And it produces native apps, in the same way that the native SDKs and IDEs do. So you can publish it to any of the stores. Any of the stores that you could publish an app to, you can publish the same apps that you produce through Xamarin. Quickly, some of the products that Xamarin provide. There's a whole bunch of them, but the two things that we're interested in are these here, which are the mono frameworks. Which is sort of what allows us to write the code in C#, and these here, which are the IDEs. And there's two IDEs. There's Xamarin Studio, which is their own IDE, and then there is a plugin for Visual Studio, which allows you to use Visual Studio to do that. And the Visual Studio plugin is available from Visual Studio 2010 upwards, but it's not supported for Visual Studio Express, only for the official versions. And Xamarin Studio is available for PC or Mac. I'm not going to go into that now, we'll just get that one. Xamarin Studio. Okay, Xamarin Studio, for those of you that want to use Xamarin Studio, it's only available for Android and iOS. It doesn't support Windows Phone. It's pretty powerful. My personal opinion, it's not as good as Visual Studio, but it's not bad. It's better than Eclipse, and it's probably as good as Xcode. Both of them, you get integrated debugging on the simulator support and on devices, and all the things that you would expect from the native IDE. One thing to note is that the PC version only supports Android. It does not support development. It doesn't support the iPhone development. They've included a couple of designers. There's an Android designer. They think it's great. I personally don't, but I prefer writing my XML or AXML as it's called in this manually. It is drag and drop, but it still needs some work on it. They also have an iOS designer, which is sort of one up on what Xcode provides. It's better, and it's you can actually simulate the behavior locally with it as well. And both these are available on both within Xamarin Studio and within Visual Studio if you have the plugin. They also have a thing called Xamarin Forms, which is, especially if you want to get something done quickly, is great. It's basically some shared libraries that provide you with an abstraction of some standard screens, standard forms. So things like maps, they've got a map one where, they basically said, well, it's on every device that's doing the same thing. Why can't we abstract this and make it so that you only have one call to make from your code, and we'll sort out behind the scenes how, which libraries get called. And there's things like date pickers, and there's various lists and things like that. You can customize them. You can mix them with native widgets that you've designed yourself. But it's a good starting point, and especially for simpler things like, login screens, splash screens, terms and conditions screens. It's almost a no-brainer. Use this, you save some time. And we'll see how it develops and sees how flexible it becomes over time for other things. They also have a component store, which has two uses. One, it allows you to go and browse it, and people have put things in there. Some are free and some get charged for. So there's some great ones in there. Newton Soft JSON is a very powerful JSON tool that's in there. There's an HTTP one. There's a whole bunch in there that are free and very good. But there's also some companies that specialize in, for example, creating very high quality GUI widgets and GUI components that you can buy and incorporate into your app. So obviously, if you're just doing something on the side, probably not worth it. But if you're doing something professional, maybe for an enterprise or for another company, that could save you a lot of time. It may well be worth spending $100 to get these great components, which will save you a month's work of developing your own. And then on top of that, of course, you can publish into that store as well. So if you've got some great libraries and components that you want to share, you can publish in there and make it free or charge for it. Just like any sort of Xamarin, take a cut. I can't remember what it is, but it's 20% or 15% or whatever. It's the sort of standard thing, and that could be a revenue stream for you as well. So what's the bad news? The bad news is the licensing. It's expensive. Well, it's not expensive if you're an enterprise. If you're a professional development company, it's the sort of price you would expect to pay for Microsoft products, for example, development tools, professional grade development tools. If you're an independent or small company, then it's pretty significant. And the way they do this is you get a yearly subscription, and it's per platform, per developer. So they basically price it and say, hey, if you want Android, it's going to cost you X. If you want iOS, it's going to cost you X. And if you want both, it's going to cost you 2X. And you need it for each developer. So each computer that's going to be running it, you basically need you need a separate license for. Now, if the subscription expires, it still works. You can still build apps. You can still deploy apps. The apps you've got out there will continue to work. There's nothing in there that turns them off or anything like that. What you don't get is the updates. So guess what? When iOS 9 comes out and you've let your subscription lapse, you won't have access to those iOS libraries and updates, those APIs. And there's basically 4 licensing levels at the moment, and these are what they are. Sorry, I meant to look up the prices, and to confirm the prices, so these are estimates. So the starter one is free. So if you want to just give it a try, you can download the starter one, and it's, and you can do that. And it doesn't cost you a thing, but it's limited. It limits the app size. It limits, especially if you're bringing libraries and things, then you'll very rapidly find that it refuses to build things. And what's worse, and this is how ridiculous it is a lot of the demo code they provide, and samples they provide, you can't build using this starter one. It also misses some build features as well, which you'll probably come across pretty rapidly as well. Because they like to say, well, functionally everything works. It does, but actually some of the build features don't work, which causes problems. However, if you do get the free one, you can also get a 30-day free trial of the full package, what they call the business version. And then you get everything, but only for 30 days. And then you have the choice of going back to the free version or buying licenses. So they also have this indie version. Okay, so it's $300 for one platform, $600 if you want both of them. And there's no Visual Studio plugin. So you're stuck with Xamarin Studio, and it means that you can't develop for Windows Phone within that platform. You can still get around it if you've got Visual Studio. Xamarin and Visual Studio will work from the same solution, from the same projects, and all that will happen is Xamarin will ignore the Windows Phone specific libraries, and Xamarin will basically ignore Xamarin and Visual Studio will ignore the other one. Will ignore the others. The business version, it's full. It comes with the Visual Studio plugin. I can't remember the cost, but it's about $1,000 a platform. So it's about $2,000 if you want it. And then there's an enterprise version, and I can't remember what the enterprise version is, but it's bloody expensive. And if you want to be a Xamarin partner, you have to have that. So they're trying to milk professional development shots for it. And that's it. So that's an introduction to Xamarin. I'm going to hand over to Tim. All right. There you go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks, David. That was great. We love, as David said, we do love Xamarin at Microsoft. So if you're interested in doing that, and you had the fears that Xamarin going to be around to be supported, I think they will be. There's a lot of speculation that people were like, oh, is Microsoft going to buy them? That's what people thought was going to be announced at Build, but no, we didn't. We have a strong partnership with them, and to better support them, we allowed a lot of our compilers and a lot of our .NET stack to go open source to better be aligned with the Mono development program. So a lot of good stuff there. My name is Tim Benrick. I'm a technical evangelist for Microsoft. So what that means is I do technical presentations. I go to schools, meetups, anything that if you've got a business and you're like, hey, Tim, it'd be great if you could do a talk on Azure at my company. Feel free to reach out to me and we'll see what we can do. My information here, Twitter is Tim Benrick, and my blog, Tim R&D. R&D is a random function or research and development, however you want to think about it. But timrnd.com, on there, it's got my LinkedIn. Feel free to do that. Email, you can email me from the contact, or it's tim.benrick@Microsoft. Pretty easy. So we're going to talk about Azure. I'm going to go relatively quick because I had kind of an hour, so I'm going to cut some of the more advanced stuff out of my demo and turn that over to David for the Xamarin piece of it, but we'll still do some cool things. So we're going to do a quick intro into Azure. Out of hand, how many people are not familiar with Azure and what it offers today? Okay, so a few. We're going to do I'll do a demo of Azure, the Azure portal, show you kind of how you interface what it is and see what it is. And then we'll talk about mobile services. Is anyone here, they've heard of Azure, but how many people have not heard of Azure Mobile Services? All right. So Azure Mobile Service is really cool, and that's what we're going to show today. It's very powerful to get up and running, and then scalable, which is really cool to take it from there. And then at the end of the way, I'll talk about some ways to get some free Azure credits and to make sure you're taking advantage of the programs Microsoft has and offers. So that's kind of what we're going to do.
Free stuff.
Free stuff is awesome, yeah. So, we're all here. Hopefully we know what the cloud is. The cloud, to me, I hate it's a buzzword, right? My favorite ad that I absolutely hate to love, I guess would be the way to say it, was with Windows Vista. It was I built this, I'm a PC or whatever, and I made Windows Vista or whatever it was. And they talked about how everything was in the cloud and it was this. And it drove me nuts. But to me, the cloud is a way to have basically infinite or perceived infinite elasticity. So I can deploy one resource, and if I need to scale up, I can deploy another one, and just keep going. A good cloud partner or platform is global. You don't want to just be in the US or in Chicago. You want to have things in the East Coast, the West Coast. You want to be in Australia and Asia and Europe and Africa. You want to have data centers all over the world. So if you want to deploy or scale out globally, you can do that. It's also got to be self-service. I can't call up my cloud provider and say, hey, I need a VM. Spin me up a, quad-core 32 gig RAM of memory. Like, I should be able to do that by myself. And more importantly, I should be able to automate that. I should be able to have, tools like PowerShell or Chef or some command line interfaces that allow me to spin up VMs, configure them, and go. And that's kind of where the power of the cloud comes from. And the best part is the economics of it is you pay for what you use. A lot of cloud platforms, you pay per hour. Proud to announce with Azure, you pay per minute. So if you spin up a VM and you got it up for 3 hours and 26 minutes, you pay for 3 hours and 26 minutes. They're not going to round it up to 4 hours. So it's small things like that, but it's cool. And that's the thing. So if you're a startup and you spin up a development VM because you need this really beefy development environment, you're developing and you use it for an hour, you spin it down, well, you only cost an hour, and you have to go out and buy these huge racks and all this licensing and the software to do it. So that's kind of what the power of the cloud is. And why use the cloud? I kind of did that spiel. I just added the slide, so I should probably take that back or scale down what I say before. But again, it's speed. I should be able to quickly deploy VMs, configure them. I should be able to scale them up and down, both horizontally. If I have a one web server and it's just getting bogged down, I should be able to easily add a second web server and a third and a fourth. But also scale vertically. If I've got dual core and I need, all my computations are really killing my CPU, I should be able to easily scale up to go quad core or 8 cores or whatever there could be. And so you can do all of that with Azure. And again, the economics, pay for what you use and not have to have all this overhead of licensing and VMs that are just sitting there dormant. And like I said, Azure's global. We have 16 regions worldwide. The purple ones are data centers where you can have compute. So you can run a VM, you can use mobile services, you can have SQL databases out there. The green ones are, I guess that they used to say it's our content delivery network. So we have CDN network all over the place. So if you've got static resources and you've got images or videos and you want to use Azure CDN, you can easily do that. So that if you've got a video and people in Africa are trying to get the video, they're not going to your GoDaddy server in Chicago. They're loading up from a cached copy in Africa. So you load your videos or your images into your closest data center, and then it takes care of replicating that all for you in a secure way, so you don't have to worry about it. And that's kind of the power of having a great cloud platform and a good CDN. So again, pay for what you use, per minute billing. And so if you're new to cloud computing, there's 3 terms that are really heavily used. IaaS, sometimes pronounced EaaS, depends on what kind of accent you have. Same with Azure, sometimes pronounced Azure. All depends on your accent. I say IaaS, infrastructure as a service. That's where you're going to spin up a VM, and you're going to take care of security, Windows updates, all of that stuff. We'll get to that in the next slide. But there's also platform as a service. And Microsoft Azure is really awesome because we have a huge offering of platform as a service capability. So sure, you can spin up a VM and configure it to whatever you want, But the cool part is using things like mobile services, which we're going to talk about, which enable you to have a backend spun up where you can very rapidly consume that through APIs and not have to worry about a thing. And platform as a service is really awesome. We've got them for databases, for mobile services, for HPC nodes, for media services if you want to do live streaming or you want to have live encoding and decoding. We have all of that, so you just consume an SDK and you get to focus on what's important and what makes you good and not trying to deploy a media server where you're going to have to worry about codecs and all this crap that nobody wants to care about. And then there's software as a service, which is kind of like you don't have any control. That's things like you're using Salesforce, where sure, you can modify and configure it, but you're not in charge of deploying data or customizing configurations. Office 365 is another great one. Software as a service for Azure is we partner with things like SendGrid. So if you want to send out a bunch of emails and not have to worry about bounce backs and you just want an SDK to control that, you can use SendGrid and work with that. So those are kind of the three cloud computing nomenclatures that are out there. And to better visualize that, with traditional software, you've got everything. You've got to worry about having power and redundant power. You've got to worry about all of your routers and your switches and making sure that you're redundant and you've got backups. And then you have to worry about your storage servers. What kind of, huge, expensive are you going to buy them from EMC? Where are you going to get all your storage from? And then you have to get your servers. You're going to get what racks from Dell or from whomever. And then you can choose to virtualize it, whether it's hypervisor, VMware, whatever you want to do. And then you get your OS, and you have to worry about Windows security updates and middleware installing Java and whatever you're going to use. And so with cloud computing, we simplify that. And infrastructure as a service, they take care of everything for you. These are in huge data centers, size of football fields with servers upon servers and racks, and they take care of redundant internet on different backbones and different power on different power grids. And most of them, like there's one in O'Hare, it's right next to ComEd. So you see our data centers are strategically aligned so that there's all these great capabilities so that it stays up. And then they virtualize it and you just get the OS. So you can install your OS, manage your updates, whether that's Linux or Windows, whatever it is. Anything that can boot through a VHD and be on 64-bit architecture, you can put in Windows Azure. You can upload whatever you want. So that's really cool. And then fast forward to platform as a service. If you don't care about any of that and you just want to write great code and deploy it and have it run and have great uptime, then platform as a service might be for you. And that way you take care of the application code and your data. That's what you manage, and everything else is managed for you, which is really great. And then software as a service, you don't touch any of it. You just consume someone else's application. All right. So I missed a slide in there, but I bet you it's the next one. But basically, these are some of the numbers that Azure kind of boasts about. We're in 57% of Fortune 500 companies use Azure. 30 trillion storage objects. That's images and videos and all kinds of anything you can store in binary blob storage. We get 3 million requests per second. There's over 300,000 active websites. Just you can read these. I'm not going to go on, but there's a lot of things. Azure's powerful, it's flexible, and it's strong. Some of the bigger kind of releases to boast about is Titanfall. Anyone's in gamers. Titanfall was kind of annoyed with all the peer-to-peer hosting of video games. If I'm going to run a video game, I'm going to set up my own server, and people are going to connect to my server, and so I've got the fastest speed, and everyone else may or may not be laggy depending on how far away they are from me. So Titanfall is like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So what they decided to do is use Azure to create regional servers. So a server, if you're in California, the server's in the West Coast, it spins up, and everyone connects to that central server. So sure, there's still some lag because you may be farther away, but you get to choose the data center that's closest to you, and you have more equal playing ground. And that was something that Titanfall really wanted to do. In addition, they use a lot of Azure's HD Insights and all the platform as a service capabilities to power their artificial intelligence. So if you've got your robot running with you, he knows your moves. Every time you kind of go, when you play a level and you go left all the time, he knows 90% of the time he goes left. So his robot's automatically going to start going there. So he knows. And if you go right, well, they're like, oh, crap, he has to go around, right? But it's cool. And they were able to take ability of Azure, and on launch day, they had over 100,000 virtual machines running worldwide. And that's really cool. And that's not something that just big AAA game studios can do. That's what you guys can do. They use the same SDKs and the same APIs that everyone gets access to. So that's really cool. Same thing with the Sochi Olympics. How many of you guys watched this online on NBCOlympics.com? If you did, you were going through Azure's web servers. So all of the online streaming for the Olympics was done on Azure. They did the encoding and the live coding and transcoding of all of the content. And so they had over 100 million viewers, And just for the U.S.-Canada hockey game, there were 2.1 million concurrent users. NBC Olympics estimated 2 million. And they said, okay, we've got 2 million users for this. And so if you were to go back the previous Olympics when Azure didn't exist or cloud platforms like this didn't really exist, they would say, okay, what do we think we're going to have for the biggest hockey game? They're like, oh, 2 million concurrent users. So they're going to build out their server farm for 2 million concurrent users. And they're going to have to buy all this hardware, and they're going to have to do all this. And when you've got curling on at 3 in the morning, they've got thousands, hundreds of, if not millions of thousands of dollars. That was a word. That's a bit Romney way to say that. Or was that Biden? I forgot. What did he say? Anyways, you've got millions of dollars of unused hardware sitting there dormant while curling's on, just because you think you're going to have 2 million. And then what happened? They got 2.1 million. So if that happened and they had all their own hardware, and you get that 0.1, well, you've got 0.1 of a million people really pissed off because they can't watch the hockey game. They get poor performance. And so at Build, if you watch any of the Build keynotes, we have the president of NBC Olympics or NBC Sports come out, and he said, we chose to partner with Azure. And what was great about that partnership is he said they spent something like $5 billion or $7 billion on the rights to broadcast the Olympics in the U.S. and other countries. 5 or 7 billion. And they have 14 days to recoup that revenue. That's insane. And so if Azure was down, then they lost money, and there would have to be an SLA. So luckily, and the reason the slide's here is it worked perfectly. It was awesome, right? They had the ability to scale up and scale down. So when they were watching curling at 3 in the morning, they scaled down all of their servers, so they only have, let's say, 100,000 servers. And when hockey came on, they scaled up. Let's say they had 400,000 or 400,000 servers running. And then when they got that 0.1, they said, okay, now we've got 450,000, right? So they were able to do that elasticity because Azure supports that, and a good cloud platform does that. So that's really cool, something they like to boast about. And what a lot of people don't know is Microsoft Azure, sure, it's called Microsoft Azure, but it's not just for Microsoft products. We have the only cloud platform that is supported by Oracle. So Oracle and Microsoft went in partnership, and so you get fully support, can run Java, and you can run Oracle database engine in Azure, fully supported. You could call up Microsoft and say, hey, my Oracle server is not working, and they will support you. Same thing with Linux. We have a ton of Linux distributions, Ubuntu, SUSE, OpenSUSE, what is it, CentOS is another one, right? All of those are supported. Again, you can call up Microsoft via your SLA and say, hey, I need help with this, and they will support you. And then, for mobile services, we support Android, iOS. We've got Hadoop and Mongo and MySQL, all of these great things in Azure because Microsoft wants Azure to be a cloud platform that everyone can use, not just Microsoft devs. And of course, we've got great first-party support for Microsoft's products and .NET, but you can run a lot of things on there, not just Microsoft. So
bottom line, last one, big and bottom.
Yeah, and Chef is fully supported. I plugged Chef earlier in the conversation. I'll just take off the puppets later for that one. We'll put a big X through there. And so this slide's kind of old. I think I don't know if we're referring to it this anymore, but it's kind of Azure's got kind of these building blocks. So you can use virtual machines, you can use websites, mobile services, our CDN network, media services, and you can plug in these different application building blocks to what makes sense for your application. And you can use all of them, you can use none of them, and it's really great and powerful. So that's kind of Azure in a nutshell. Any questions on the capabilities of Azure? No. Okay. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I'll give a quick intro. You can go to azure.microsoft.com or even just azure.com. We bought that. It takes you here. And here you can come in, you can view pricing if you wanted to see what it costs to run things. A lot of documentation in the library for if you're looking at .NET or what SDKs there are, but also if you want virtual machines, cloud services, however you want documentation. But the important piece here is to go into the portal. If you click free trial, you'll get $200 credit to use in a month, and then the next month you pay for what you use. But you can go to the portal here. I'll ask you to log in. I'm already logged in. And this is the old HTML5 portal. We have a really cool new portal, but I'm going to stick to the old one because it's easy for me to show you all of the services that we have to offer. So taking some of the mystery out of this, on the left-hand side, if you want to run a web server, you can come in here and run in a website, and that will do that. If you want to run a virtual machine, you come here, click virtual machine, and it says, okay, you want a virtual machine. I'm going to pop up the gallery because it's better for demoing. And it says, All this streaming is killing us, right? So here we go. If I want a Microsoft server, I can get Server 2012, 2008. I can launch SharePoint SQL Server. If I want Dynamics, I can come in here. Don't listen to the guy in the room who says Dynamics sucks. No, I'm joking. You can, hopefully this keeps going. Wah, wah. I'm going to plug in while that's not responding. Okay, so you can run Great Plains, Nav. Again, like I said, you got Ubuntu, CentOS, SUSE, and all of these great VMs that you can just pick and spin up and go. So for this, we'll just create a Microsoft one, and I'll just show you kind of this next screen.
A question for you.
Yeah, we'll do a Ubuntu.
I spin up a BizTalk VM server. Does that cover my BizTalk licenses also with the subscription?
So the way it works, great question. So if, let's say I spin up BizTalk or I spin up a SQL server, the licensing is included in the pricing of that VM. So if, let's say, a normal VM costs $1 an hour to run. If you're running a SQL server, maybe it costs $1.25 because that 25 cents is going against the license. And so that's how you pay for the licensing fee, and that's really cool because you don't have to go out and or have an EA and buy this, $10,000, $20,000 license. You just get that as part of your per billing. However, one caveat: if you have MSDN as a developer and you connect your MSDN license to this, then the licenses from your MSDN are included, and you just pay that $1 an hour rate. So if it's for development purposes, then you get the discounted, or if you have your own licenses through kind of an enterprise agreement, you can work that when you're working with your enterprise agreement, and they know he's got X number of licenses, and then your pricing is different. So that's cool enough. But so here's a Ubuntu. I give it a name, and then I pick the size I want. And you can see there's a wide variety of configurations. And one of the questions you get is, am I locked into these configurations? And you are. You have to go by either 8-core 14 or whatever these configurations are. But you can see there's a lot of them, and these should support your needs. You can get up to 16 cores, 120 or 112 gigs of RAM, depending on what you're doing. So there's a lot of options for that. And so again, on the old portal, it's great because you can walk through this. You can see all those building blocks that I talked about right here, running through. And also, for you, I don't know if you looked at the platform as a service, BizTalk services, you can actually just deploy some of the integration config, and Azure will handle the BizTalk server for you. So I'm not too familiar with it, but that's an option there. So these are a lot of the great plugins and features you can do, and it's saying, hey, do you want to use the new portal? And I don't want to right now. But so that's kind of Azure in general and how you access it, how you spin up resources. Any questions? All right, we'll go back to some slideware, and then we'll get to some fun stuff here in a minute. So that was Azure. All right, so mobile services. All right, mobile services is pretty cool. Before, we used to call it a backend in a box. So if you are an application developer and you know your app's going to need a backend to store data, to have some kind of asynchronous processes running, you could create a website with install web API or Node or whatever you want, configure your web server and do all of those pieces, which may take time, and you may have to have a sysadmin to help with installing updates or whatever that is, or you can try mobile services. And mobile services allows you, within minutes, you can create this wrapper for you to have table CRUD requests, so you can have insert, update, read, delete. That goes into a SQL database, goes into Mongo, goes into NoSQL type storage. You can also have very easily authentication. So if you're trying to authenticate with OpenAuth type things like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Microsoft accounts, or even, which is really powerful, is Active Directory. So if your company has got Active Directory, they can federate up to an Azure directory service, and then you can add authentication to your application within minutes and have a really enterprise-grade application using mobile services pretty quickly. It also has the ability to have your own custom API. So if you don't need a table, you just want to hit an endpoint and maybe pass it a parameter, and it does some math and spits you back a result, you can do that through the APIs, custom APIs. And then also it's got a great integration for push notifications. So through 2 lines of code, you can say send a push notification to iOS, Android, Windows Phone, BlackBerry, all of the main phones, and it will take care of that for you. So you don't have to worry about signing up for APN servers and doing all of the complexity that goes with doing push notifications. It's pretty cool. And the other thing is a scheduler. So how many, basic apps don't necessarily have this, but a lot of apps get complex quick because you're like, hey, I have this either asynchronous task or I have some kind of thing I have a cleanup process that I need an actual server for because I need to have a batch or a cron job, or I need to have a Windows service running to do something, to monitor a queue and all that. Well, you can take advantage of the scheduler, and maybe you've got an app where they sign up for more information, they put in their email address as step 1, they get to step 2, and they see they've got to enter 10 things, they're like, no thank you, right? I do that a lot. And so you might have a service that says, hey, every day scan the people who completed step 1 and shoot them an email that says, hey, we miss you, come back, fill out these 10 questions, right? Or hey, for you, we'll only make you fill out 2 questions, whatever it is. You can do that with mobile services very rapidly. And this is, again, our platform as a service offering. The goal is you write code, and you don't have to worry about managing servers and software, or you don't have to manage the server and the infrastructure behind it. And so mobile services has a lot of SDKs, so you can use Windows Phone, HTML, JavaScript, iOS, Android, Xamarin, PhoneGap, and I'll show you the list when we get on there. There's also Cordova and a bunch of other ones. But the really cool thing is all of these SDKs use a RESTful API. And so if you're writing in Cold Fusion or you're writing in some language, Python or whatever it is that doesn't have an SDK, well, you can just consume the RESTful service. And so everyone can use mobile services. We don't lock you into certain technology. All right. And so there's 2 kinds of ways to set up a mobile service. You can do it through JavaScript, powered by Node. And then by default, that uses a SQL Server. If you want to use kind of Mongo, no table storage, you kind of have to not necessarily hack it, but really kind of hack it, and so that you get a request, interpret it, send it to your other storage, and then say, okay, successful request, and it doesn't go to SQL. So there's some work to that, but it's fully extensible through the Node Package Manager. So if you want to install Twilio or you want to install whatever package that's in the NPM, you can do that and use that within the Azure Mobile Services. The cool thing about JavaScript, I like it a lot because it's also dynamic schema. So I don't have to worry about if I want to add a column, I don't have to do a whole database migration to add a column. It's all with JSON. It's really powerful, and so that's something to take advantage of. We also offer .NET. You can use a .NET backend. I believe it's still in preview, coming out of preview soon. And for that, it's powered by Web API. So I'm going to show you that today with the assumption most of you are C# developers. And then for that, out of the box, you can get default for SQL, Mongo, or NoSQL type table storage. And again, it's fully extensible with NuGet, so that you can request a package and put it in. Yeah?
Sorry, just to clarify, are you comparing and contrasting 2 things here?
Yeah, these are 2 options. Not so much contrasting, but just telling you, I guess, yeah, how each of them differ.
Okay, as Azure offers both.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Labeled.
Sorry. So by default, for Node, you get requests to request HTTP client, push, SendGrid, which is a partner, the console, MySQL, tables, Azure. All of these are kind of default Node packages that are defaulted. You can just get them. You don't have to worry about installing them through a separate Node package. And yeah, so that is kind of just one square of Azure. And so we zoomed into one, and we're going to show a demo on that in a second, but you can see how much detail there is in all of these have to offer. So any questions on kind of slideware before I show the demo? All right. So here's what we're going to do. There's 2 ways. We'll do one way. So I can go here and create a mobile service, and when I do that, it's going to ask me what my backend do I want, JavaScript or .NET, and that's kind of what we were showing. And doing that through the portal is cool. If you're going to do a JavaScript backend, I recommend doing it through the portal. I'm going to do a .NET backend, and so I'm going to do it through Visual Studio because that's where, as a .NET developer, that's where I live. And so if we want, I can do a JavaScript one through the portal and show you how that differs, but I think we're going to run out of time. So the way you do that is go File, New Project, and on your templates, if you've got Visual Studio 2013 Update 2, you will see Cloud is an option. And over here, I've got Azure Mobile Service, and that's what I'm going to do. And so we're going to call this, got names. We'll just call this Demo 8.14.14. Great name. And I'm going to do a Windows Azure Mobile Service, and it's going to create our project. And so with .NET, to me, the .NET backend is more complex. And actually, while that's creating that, I will show you, we'll create a .NET or a JavaScript backend as well, so I can show the difference. And so what it's asking me to do is I don't have a database server, so it's asking me to create a database server, which I'm going to do. And so that's creating my JavaScript, mobile service right here. And right here, I've got the default project for a .NET backend service. And so over here, if we expand this, we'll see that it's essentially I have got a class, and the default is a to-do list example, which is what we're going to show in Xamarin. And so it says, here's my task that I want to do, and whether or not it's complete or not. And the controller for that is basically a table controller with that to-do item, and I've got my get with a query, I've got a lookup, and then I've got your standard patch, post, and delete. And so that is all it does. And so if you want to extend this, which we'll do in a second, you would extend this here. And so now going back, I will show kind of the way the JavaScript one is still creating. We'll give it a second and I'll show. Because one of the things David wanted to do too is kind of compare and contrast the two. How many people are more proficient with JavaScript over C#? All right, so let's screw this then. All right, so here is my to-do list example. And this is what we're going to do with Xamarin, but just showing you a to-do list example doesn't help. So let's create something new. So for me, let's create a new, I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to copy and paste this, and we'll just call this phone number. We'll create something simple. And I'm going to change this to phone number. And I'm extending the entity data, which is a mobile service type. And so here I'm just going to put number, and I'm going to get rid of that. So now I've got a number, a new object, but I don't have a controller. So the cool thing is if you go to add, we've added the scaffolding items, and so I just went add scaffolding item, and there should be an Azure Mobile Services scaffold for a mobile services table controller. So we will add this and say, okay, what class are we doing this for? And it's going to be phone number, and it's going to be this demo, and that's going to be my controller name. And so just like that, I now have my web API ready to go for, and my controller ready to go for get, update, patch, and delete. And so I'm going to go ahead and run this. And the cool thing with running the .NET backend is you can run it locally, and it will give you your own local database instance, and you can debug it locally, and then you can deploy it. And then you can even remote debug it, which is really cool. With the JavaScript backend, you cannot run it locally, and you cannot remote debug it. So that's some of the pros of doing the .NET backend. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this, run it in Chrome for no particular reason. And here's my mobile service. Pretty fancy. Yeah, exactly. Now, basically what I would have to do is write a front-end application to consume this. However, with the .NET backend, this does not exist for JavaScript, but with the .NET backend, there's the help section of this. And when I go to help, it's going to dynamically generate my API documentation based off of the classes in my solution. And so if I would have run this before I added the phone number class, you would have just seen my to-do. However, I've now added the phone number controller, so it knew I've got another phone number controller, and it created a API documentation for me. So I can go and I can run a get on my phone number, and it's going to say, it's telling me these are all of the methods that are available, and if I want to run this is kind of what my thing looks like. It's just my number, which is a sample because it was a string, and then automatically it creates the ID, the version created, updated, and whether or not it was a soft delete. And so we're going to try this out, and it basically just says, okay, I'm going to run a get. That's it. And I have no record, so it's going to return me an empty array. Which it did. And so let's go ahead and add, we'll go back, and we'll go to the post, and we will insert our thing. So this is what it's telling me, okay, these are all my default values. I don't need them, they're all optional, so I'm going to bomb them. The only one that I really need is my phone number. So we'll just do sample string sample number, which we all know is not a phone number. So I'll send this, and here's my request. It told me it added my sample. I don't know, you probably can't see that. It added my sample. It dynamically generated me an ID. It gave me a version number. It told me where I created, updated, and it gave me gave me my timestamps, which is cool. So that is how you do an insert. So now let's extend this a little bit. And for that, I'm going to cheat. So here's my post phone number, which we all know is insert. Post is insert. So I wrote some really, actually I probably could have freehand or live coded this, but who likes to do that? Really good programmers, which I'm not. So we're just going to do a really simple, and I'm going to fix my object because clearly I didn't remember what I did when I practiced. Number. All right, so we're just going to add a simple logic that says if it's null or empty, if the item that I'm inserting is null or empty, send a bad request saying, hey, the phone number can't be blank. And so we'll rerun this. And as you guessed, we're going to go to help. And I can get I'll do a post. Try it out. Okay, and so now we'll get rid of all this fluff that I don't care about, and we will send in a blank string. And of course, it's going to return me a message that, hey, phone number can't be blank. That's what we expected. So let's make it a phone number or a non-phone number. And when I do that, it inserted it and it went. Right? So that was cool. But let's now make it actually be a phone number because we're going to do fun things later. So here's my next method for that. So there it is, just running a regex that says if it's a phone number, do this things. And so now you can say, well, wait, I don't have regex, right? It's saying where is this? And so because of that, I need to include my regular expression statement. And this is where the power of writing in .NET comes in, because I'm all familiar with this. I know .NET, I know how to do this. And so now I can do all my same .NET things, and I can go on. And so I'm assuming you'll all believe me that this works. We'll showcase it in a second. But now if I ran this and did this and put in text, it would fail, right? And so that's what we wanted. And so the next thing I thought we would do is, how many people in here are familiar with Twilio? 1, 2, cool. 3, cool. So Twilio is a software as a service that allows you through APIs and SDKs to send text messages or phone calls and set up a phone call tree, or text messages if you want to do short codes and say, all these different validations to your app. You can do that through Twilio. And so since I don't have a front end, because we're going to have the front end be built in Xamarin, I thought I would add some fun to the back end. And so what we'll do here is I will, again, this is where the power of being in .NET, I can go into NuGet, and I can come in here, and I can search for Twilio. And there's my Twilio REST API, so I'll install this. And as a .NET developer, this should all be familiar, right? And so now I'm going to take, and I'll walk through my code here in a second. I should be able to see it. Just throw it right here. I'm going to be bad and put it in my controller, but whatever. Minimize this, and I'm going to add in my using statement. As you can see, I'm a very lazy programmer. And so let's walk through what I added into this here. So I'm just reading what I did. So now I've got my regex that says, okay, if it's not a valid phone number, then do something with that. And then I'm going to add the 1+ to get the US, because you can send it to Europe. You can do Twilio to send everything to my phone number. And you can notice I've got a status that I don't have in my controller yet. So I'm going to add that. And the message to use Twilio is extremely simple. You put in your account, your authentication token, and then the message is twilio.send SMS with my Twilio, which is what that is, the number I want to send it to, and then look, I've got name that I want to add as well. So I'm going to go ahead and modify this It's as simple as going to my phone number class and adding name. Oops, this is a string. All right, let's do this again. Okay, so I've added name and status because that's what my class is looking for, and so if I look through this, it should work. And now I will run this. And the thing to note as well is right now, if we go to my mobile services in Azure and we run this, all you're going to see is my JavaScript mobile service. I'm still completely working locally. I haven't deployed anything to Azure. So I'm all working within my local machine. When I run it, it knows how Azure is going to treat all this. It's using Web API and it works the way it will work when it's live. So we've launched this. That's Google. All right, there's this. Let's go to my help. And we'll do my post. And so now you can see it dynamically created. I've got number, name, and status, just like we would have expected through my, because of that's what is in our class. So to do this again, I'm just going to delete the fluff. Again, if you were writing this in your front-end client, you would have, if it's a .NET, you would have IntelliSense to know, and you wouldn't have to delete these. But because I'm sending RESTful statements, that's why I'm doing this. So we'll put in a non-phone number just to show that, and we'll leave the rest of the crap alone and submit this. And it says, again, invalid phone number. So the regex, our validation is it's not blank, and it's an actual phone number. So let's try this again. So I'll put in my cell. And I'll put in my name. And I'm actually delete status because that's an optional guy. And we're going to have fun. Try to have fun. Okay, so that's my phone. And this. So we will send this message. And there's my text message. And if I click on that and make this bigger, you can see it says, "Hello, Tim." And so that's the magic. And you can see here it says my message was sent. And so now let's make this and actually deploy this to the world. But we can, we can do this. Does anyone want to yell out their phone number? And we can.
800 588 2300.
Close, but it's not. Is it 800 582 300? Isn't it 588 2300? Can you do Luna though? Now that's the true Chicagoan test.
6,000.
No. Who knows Luna?
7732.
Luna. Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah. So let's see how we would deploy this. And through again, it's Visual Studio first class for Microsoft here. So we're just going to go right click and use Web Deploy. So in here, you can see it's got Azure Mobile Services. It knew what project we had. It gave me that as an option. And it's going to say, okay, you have no mobile services. So I'm going to hit New. And I'm going to run through it. I'm going to put it, if I had multiple subscriptions, which I do, you could pick whichever one you wanted. We'll call this Demo 8.14.14, our fun name. It's going to be the .NET runtime. We'll put it in the East. We'll create our free SQL database. I think that's what I used. It's going to say, what's your sysadmin on that database? And now it will create my mobile service in Azure and deploy all the code we were just working on. And so if whatever source control type environment you're used to using for Visual Studio, you can add this solution to your own source control and then work on deployment hooks and all of those things the way you would normally write your code, which is pretty cool. If you're using the JavaScript version, the only current source control option you get is Git. So it will give you a Git hook, and the Git files are on the Azure server, and then you clone your repository, push to the repository, and it pushes it out to your mobile service.
I'm sorry, I missed that part. You said you can do automated building with Git only?
For the JavaScript backend.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so here's my Club Machine profile for this. I'm going to put it in debug mode just because maybe we want to debug it later. And now I can publish this out to the world. And while that's going here, I'm going to go to my mobile service, and you can see it's creating my demo 18.14.14. Actually, if I refresh this, it's probably done because it's been created here. And so you may be thinking, but Tim, if I go to help, yeah, it does prompt you for a login because we don't. If you're local, it knows you're debugging it locally. It doesn't prompt you. But if you're live, it's going to prompt you so that not everyone can go mess with your stuff. And it's kind of wonky, but because it's a mobile service, we didn't ask, it didn't apply any usernames and passwords. So username and password you saw me type in was for my database server, my SQL database that I created in Azure. And so for demo 14.14, the way it works is it has an application key, and that is the password for the documentation. So if I come in here and put in my password and log in, no username, that is what the credentials are. And so again, you can see it's here. And if I run a get, I'm not going to have any data. And that is because everything I was running before was local. And so you get a truly isolated local environment, which is great for testing and doing everything you want local. And then when you deploy it, you've got the production or whatever database that's up there and running. And so it is completely separate. So I'll just show, if we run this, we have no data when it comes back. And there it is. So let's run through this and just make sure it works live. So we'll go back, we'll post a phone number in here. Get rid of this. Test my regex, make sure it's working there. And we'll call this world. Send. And there's my hello world text that just came in. So that's live in the cloud, that's running. And so if I had a front-end client, which is what I was going to do now, but I'm not going to just because of time, I could write up my client, and anytime I call my insert or my post function, it's going to insert my phone number into the database and then send a text message. And so let's show what that looks like in Azure. And so in here, this is where if I had a scheduler, I would set up my scheduler, my push notifications, my identity. There's great documentation for this. It's all relatively straightforward, just like we were doing. But with Azure, you notice there's no database. If I go to configure, you'll see the actual database server. It's my demo 14 this on this SQL server. And what it does is it creates a SQL database for you using the platform as a service SQL database, which is slightly different than SQL Server. It's a flavor of SQL Server, but if you think about it in the way of, you get the same rights you would get if you had DBO permission. So if you're a SQL database guy, you can't install command line tools, you can't use regex type functions, anything where you need master or other databases you can't get. But anything you can do as DBO, store procedures, all those things you can do in SQL database. And so here's my SQL 14.14 database, and here's my connection. And so if I wanted to, which of course I want to, we will go and I'll run a query on this and you can see what it looks like. So let me go back and see what server is this on, this C1. So I'm going to add just a rule that allows me to connect to it from this location and hope their firewall allows for connections. All right. One more time.
We got past the firewall. We were told. It was the credentials.
Okay. So let's do it again.
You got past the Azure firewall.
No idea.
I don't think they required it anymore. The old syntax used to be username at server name that you had to do. I think it's no longer required.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Let me check.
People still show up that way though.
Let's look. Oh, I spelled DB wrong. Surprised that I typed that in wrong twice then. This is interesting. All right, so. We'll try this one more time, and then I'll give up. All right, I have no idea what I've made my credentials. I must have fat fingered, my fingers must have been off somewhere. So, I apologize. Yeah, I don't know. Let's try one more thing just to make sure I'm not the same.
Like it on the previous screen, I lost it set up.
All right, so it must be something with either the firewall here or something, because I'm able to get on it out here. But so if I select my database here, I don't ever use this tool, so bear with me. No. Let's see. Where do you think you go to view your tables?
Design.
There we go. There's my phone number and my to-do, so if I click here, it'll show me my data. There's this, and data, and there's my phone number with my world and the message sent. And so you can see that it's creating a SQL database. If for whatever reason I'm gonna blame firewall here, I'll try it one more time. But this does work. You have to add a firewall rule, which you saw me do. But this does allow you to connect to it, so you can manage it the way you're used to managing your databases, which is nice. All right, now it's just making me look bad. All right, I have no idea why. Anyway, so here now it's my database, and you can do it. You can go and see kind of the way it works, and it lets you, do whatever you want to do. And so that's mobile services. All right. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to go to my mobile service. And, the one thing I did want to show here is when you're in your mobile service, you can get starter applications for Windows Store, Windows 8, iOS, Android, and Xamarin, which is what David's going to show you here in a second. And so what I'm going to do is send this to David.
So does the mobile service get deployed actually as a cloud service, or is it abstracted?
It's abstracted to you. What it's actually on is a website. So it uses the Azure website, which is built on cloud services, which is built on VMs, right? So it's abstracted from you, but it does deploy it as a website that you don't get to see. And that's for both Web API, for .NET Backend Web API, or the Node.
So you don't get to control scaling or any aspect of it?
I'll show you that in a second. Yeah, good question.
One of the things I've actually looked at very little inside of Azure is Google.
Not this, not Q. Just go ahead and type it in. Is there a way I can send it through the Google Hangout thing?
Maybe.
Whatever's easier for you. So the way the scaling for it works is you go to the Scale tab, and you can scale it up horizontally so that, like for instance, if you're on Basic, you can configure your scheduling time, so you can scale it based off a schedule. Say you get a heavy user base at noon for whatever reason, everyone's on their lunch break looking at your fantasy football app or whatever it happens to be. You can scale up here. You can scale by you scale here. You can scale it by API calls, or just say, hey, I want to add in 5 more instances. I don't know if standard allows you to scale it. Doesn't look like you can scale it horizontally or vertically. You can just scale it horizontally.
Yeah, since it's built on the website, you're going to have a lot less available to them.
Correct. Yeah, so it is still limited. It's great for prototyping, getting your app up. It's great for production use cases. Again, if you can fit into a certain mold, there's a lot of cool things. Since it sounds like you've used mobile service before, one of the cool features that's hidden to the world is this is your URL, which we've been seeing. But if I go in before this and put in SCM, this will take me to what's known as the Kudu portal. And this is what's used to control automated deployments, webhooks. I'm already authenticated, that's why it let me come straight in here. But you get some really cool things where you can run and you can see all the environment variable. You can see what you're on, what your system is running, all of your app settings, your connection strings and environment variables. You can see all of the behind the scenes things here. And it's also cool, you can run PowerShell commands or just straight up command prompt things. So I can run a directory listing and I could see how it works. So you can see it's in my site folder, and I can, this is obviously not written well, but, and you can see there's my root deployments, and I get all of these. You can run a process explorer to see what processes are running. You can do a memory dump. So you get a lot of cool things in this Kudu portal. And this Kudu portal is kind of behind the scenes, meant to be used mostly for automated deployments, which is pretty cool.
I've just very quickly looked. Are there any tie-ins for enterprise authentication?
Yeah. So within the identity, you can connect to your Windows Azure Active Directory, and you can specify. So if you've got Azure Active Directory and then someone's federating to it, you can use Azure Active Directory to authenticate through that. Absolutely. So we'll finish up with some deckware and then turn it over to build up the front end to that mobile service we just created. So if you're new, if you've never used it, you can go and get a free 3-month trial. You get, no, is it 3 months? It's 1 month. This is wrong. It might have been 3 months at one time, but it's 1 month. It gives you $200 to use. You can use that $200. If you go over it, you get the choice to put in a spending cap. So once you hit $200, you're done. Or you can give your credit card information and say, yeah, go, because I'm going to continue to use this. So you can go and burn it up. If you've used your email account, use a Microsoft account, if you've used that before on a free trial, you can't get another one. So if you try and sign up and it doesn't work, maybe you attended a boot camp or a developer session and that was there. However, if you're an MSDN subscriber, are there any people in here who companies provide MSDN subscriptions? A couple? Yeah. So you can activate your Azure benefits. The way you do that is when you log into MSDN, it's on your main page. It says activate Azure benefits. And depending on what version of MSDN you can get up to $150 if you're on Ultimate, and it scales down based off the different versions. And so that's $150 a month to run. You can do 3 VMs for 16 hours, all this, kind of, marketing stuff.
I think you still cannot use your corporate identity if you're an EA customer.
If you're an EA customer.
If you're an MSDN customer and an EA customer, I think they restrict you. You have to then tie your benefit to your personal email address.
It just has to be a Microsoft account. And so there's some confusions. If it's an organizational account.
No. It recognizes the fact that your account, your email domain is tied to an EA. And they say, oh yeah, you can't activate your MSDN benefit because you're an EA customer. You have to use your EA benefits. So then you have to drop down and transfer your MSDN benefit to your personal account.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's really awkward. I talked to the product team about it. But just in case anyone's an EA customer, be aware that you may have to jump through hoops to get both benefits.
Okay. I did not know that. The other thing is if you're a startup, there's a program called BizSpark. And so to qualify for BizSpark, you are developing software, you're developing an app or an application that you're not consulting with. So if you're a consultant, that's great, keep consulting. But if you want to leverage BizSpark, this application has to be for you for consumption to the general public. not something you can't use these benefits and these services to write software for other people. But BizSpark is an awesome program. If this is interesting to you, and I'll talk about it in a second, please reach me, my blog, timrnd, R, the letter ND.com. You can email me or tweet me or whatever, and I can get you connected. But basically, if you're less than 5 years old, making less than $1 million, and you're developing an app, regardless if it's going to iOS, Android, or Windows, you qualify for this. And with this, you become a BizSpark startup. You get five users. Each user gets an MSDN Ultimate subscription, which provides you all of Microsoft software. So you get Visual Studio Ultimate, you get Office, you get Server, you get SQL Server, all of our licenses for free. You get it for free for 3 years. It's a 3-year program. A lot of people say, okay, what happens after 3 years? All of the licenses that you've used and you've consumed while within the program are yours to keep. You own them. So if you downloaded, it's 2014 right now, you're in the program in 2017, you graduate, well, and you downloaded SQL Server 2017, that's your license. You own that. Now, granted, you won't get 2018 or 2019, whatever comes out, but you own those licenses. So that's really cool. Same with Office. But the powerful thing is Ultimate subscriptions give you $150 a month in Azure credit, and that's per user. So if you have 5 users, or you burn them and say Dev 1, QA, staging, whatever, you get $150 per account to use Azure, which is really cool. And if you're an awesome startup and you're using a lot of Azure, you may qualify for something as BizSpark Plus, where you get $5,000 a month in Azure benefits for the first year, half that, so $30K for the second year, and then hopefully in year 3 you're figured out your revenue model and you're able to make money. So if that's something that's interested, please email me. By show of hands, anyone who haven't heard of that is interested in that? Okay, yeah, so make sure you shoot me an email and we'll get you going in that. The other cool thing with that is you get a free license to develop or to deploy to both Windows and Windows Phone. So if you are building apps, that normally $99 license is free to you. You still have to pay for iOS and Android if you're going to do that. And you saw me use Twilio. Twilio is a partner of Windows Azure. If you use the promo code TIMRND, you get $20 credit and you upgrade your account. So the way that works is you sign up, you get a free trial, you can send texts to your phone number, you can call your phone number, and it has a little message that says this is a test account. And then once you upgrade it, you get a phone number that you use, and then you start paying. It's something like less than a penny per text, but you can get $20 to play around and do that and send text to everyone. So TimRD is my promo code for that, and it's a great service. I really like it. Makes for fun demos. Any questions? No? Yeah?
Can I get a show of hands in the room who uses Visual Studio frequently?
Everyone.
Good, because you blazed through that demo like lightning.
Oh. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's being recorded, right?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so that's me. And then we'll give it to David to hopefully power through the front-end app if you want.
Oh, some more questions on that side.
Okay.
We can chat offline if you
No,
want
but
to.
it's for the room.
Okay.
Show of hands, is anybody a startup that is building an app that came to this meetup because they're interested in dabbling in Azure?
3, 4.
Okay, and this gentleman who was sitting here.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Any more?
Why did everybody come here today?
Free food?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you, Tim. As we're running out of time, and I know everyone's tired, okay, we're not going to do the full thing with this. I'm just going to show you, just run you through some things and show you a couple of things. If you create your Azure mobile service and you click Xamarin, after you've created it, it will give you the option of downloading an app for iOS and an app for Android and an app for Windows Phone. And basically, that's this to-do list demo. What we've done is that we've taken all of that and we've basically sort of mucked around with it and made it into a cross-platform app. So I'm not going to go through the whole, the download process and all of that stuff. What we did, and what I want to just do is take you through the structure of what we've come up with.
So is the download just a generic template, or is the download actually pre-configured to your endpoint?
No, it's generic. You have to put your endpoint in.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll show you where that goes. And I'll just sort of run through a couple of things with you. So what it comes up with is basically these here. It comes up with Xamarin PCL, Xamarin PCL, a PCL. It's a programmable, a portable class library. It's not a shared library. And then it basically comes up with for each of the platforms, you have your own platform-specific project as well. Now you can have as many, remember, platform-specific projects, as many PCL projects, and as many shared projects as you like. Right? This is a very, very simple thing, so it's just come up with one, and we sort of figged it a bit to try and show some things. And I also created this a shared project as well, to try and just show you a little bit of why you might want to use a shared project or a pseudo shared project you might prefer to do, but let's show you some of that. So let's just look at the portable class library first, a class called Common. And what Common does is, you put whatever you want in there, that's going to be used by everything. If it's a PCL, it can be referenced by most things and used by everything. So I put a few things in there to help, with the GUI and that sort of thing, just some static values to handle the GUI. But the important thing is that this is where it creates your mobile service. So it declares a static instance of the mobile service client, which is basically all you need to basically instigate a lot of those RESTful services. As part of that class, there's a whole bunch of standard methods which allow you to connect to tables and pull the information out of it. And it does it intelligently, so depending on what you pass into it, it knows what it's bringing back. Data connection monitor, yeah, that's some more of my crap I've put in there. Okay, so it creates this when it instantiates a class, it initiates the client. So it basically creates this, and you create a new mobile service. And what I did was, which I had forgotten to do there, was I actually put this stuff, which was the one I set up, in some variables at the top, some static variables, and just call those static variables instead, so that they were easy to muck around with and change. And then, of course, screwed it up because I didn't actually reference it. I forgot to comment it back in. So as you can see, that's where I copied the strings that Tim just sent me. So here's an example of this is a get incomplete items. This is another one that it provides you, and basically it's just querying the table. And basically what you can do is you can say, basically you create your query by saying, hey, give me everything that's in this table, but I'm going to embed a query into it. So it allows you to, and because it's using lambdas, this is really, really powerful. It means you don't have to write, lots of SQLs. You don't have to write specific web services to handle certain things. What you can do is query the tables directly and have it return things for you. You don't even have to worry about what the JSON's doing, because it will just return those objects to you. So in our case, the table has everything in the table is called an item, and what this is actually going to do is say, hey, where the item has got item complete equals false, where that column complete is set to false, return it. So we're basically going to get an array of these items returned, And, you know, in our table, there's only 2 things. There's, you know, the name and complete. But if you had 20 things in there, it would return all of them. It would return all those fields to you. And you can make those queries, those Lambda expression queries, as complex as you like. So, you know, if you had a date in there, you could say, hey, give me anything between these dates and where the name begins with A. And, you know, you can make that as complex as you like. And basically, you can direct it so you can actually sort of tailor what you're getting from your client code rather than have to write that as part of your web service and actually publish it as part of your RESTful API, which is really powerful, as I'm guessing most of the people here, at least, you know, are mobile developers, they're client developers, and you don't want to have to create, you know, 200 different web services and handle all that server complexity. This does it for you, which is really useful. And it also defines this to-do item class, which matches, of course, what's in the table. And you have to basically include these attributes in there, and you do this so it can be converted to and from the JSON that's getting sent backwards to and from the service in the background. If you didn't do this, you'd have to actually get the JSON string, you'd have to pass it yourself. By doing this, it's going to do it for you. So basically, it's doing that object mapping for you. So in our case, you know, we know it's a string, which is an ID, because everything in the database has an ID. The text, which is the name, and complete. So that if you look at the table, then those are the things that are in those tables that are full. And then that's it. You know, if there was a date in there, we could just put another one in that said date. If there was, you know, an address in there, we could add as much in there as we wanted. But basically, that's what matches what's in the table. And because this is such a simple one, that's all that's in the common part. But that's, you know, that's been created as a PCL. So when this PCL was created, you can see it was created with the .NET 4.5 framework, and it was for Windows 8, Windows Phone Silverlight, Xamarin Android, and Xamarin iOS. So it supports all those platforms. You could have added more. We can change it here, but we could you know, we could put Mac in there. We could have put you know, anything Windows 7. I guess we could have put in there as well. You know, so you know, that just shows what support. Yes.
How do you put stuff in there in your computer? Do you go through NuGet or do you find it on this website?
For
anything.
Well, in this case, we downloaded the demo project, but you would write it. You know, normally you'd write it by hand. So you would potentially use NuGet stuff. So you could, for example, and I'll show you. There's a couple of packages that this uses, which we get from NuGet.
Are you referring to iOS.net? Visual Studio 2013 update has built-in support for all of these things, and so as new capabilities that you may want to target come out, they'll be added to that. So you select your minimum that you want to support, and then if you try and use a .NET library or something that's not supported on iOS or whatever, it says this won't work in the PCL because you've chosen Windows Phone Silverlight. Now, if you chose Windows Phone 8.1, it would work, right? So that's controlled through Visual Studio.
Yeah. But for example, this uses, if we look at the assembly, the references, this uses Newtonsoft JSON, and it also uses .NET HTTP. Neither of those, okay. Newtonsoft JSON is a third-party library that actually has been referenced by NuGet, and gets downloaded. So you actually go through the process of saying, hey, I need that. There's a NuGet reference for it, and you just click on NuGet Manage. You can put Newtonsoft in there, and it will just pop up, and you just install it. And you install it in every project that requires it. Similarly, with systemnet.http, it's the HTTP client, which is required, is supported natively in iOS and Java, but it's not supported natively in Windows Phone, strangely enough, which is odd, seeing it's a Microsoft library. And again, you have to download that as a NuGet everywhere it's needed. But one of the nice things is that when you reference those in there, it knows about it, so it prompts you to go get them if you haven't already. So that's the portable class library. Let's look at the shared library. So I created a shared library, and the way that shared libraries work are that you have this root library, and then you have an associated library underneath it for each of the target platforms. And one of the nice things, what I like to use that concept for, is that when you've got something that's got, maybe has quite a lot of it is platform independent, but there's bits that are platform dependent in there, and they're too tightly coupled to break away from each other. This is a good way to be able to still share that common code, and be able to automatically make sure that it gets built with the right platform specific code in there. Now you can do that in Visual Studio and .NET by using compilation tags. So if Android, if iOS, and if Windows Phone. And you could embed that anywhere you like, apart from in the PCL. You could scatter that throughout your code. But that's going to be pretty unmanageable. So this is a nice way of doing it. And the way I like to do it is say, hey, what I'm going to do is in this root package, I'm going to have what I call the standard interfaces for any functions that I want to use that I think should be the same. So that means that when I call it any code, it's the same thing. I can call, so in this case, I've implemented, where is it? So data connection is available. So I go and check to see if a data connection is available. Well, obviously each platform does it in a slightly different way, and they need slightly different things. And they bring back different things. But I can create a standard interface in there, or standard method, so that wherever I need to check a data connection, I just call into this this shared root package for that method, and then it will then call the appropriate method in the platform specific shared libraries or shared projects for me, and I don't have to worry about it. And I do that by using these in here, by using these compilation tags to pull in the correct library, correct shared library. Control Z. And then in there, there's something that's basically called the same, and I'll show that in a moment. So I just sort of did the subject data connection before it went to try and pull anything from the service, because why try and pull anything from the service when you don't have a data connection to use? Now it just so happens that there's not a lot in there that's that's platform independent. So all this is really doing is giving a common way of calling that functionality. However, there's a lot of instances where you might have code where most of it's the same. So, for example, accessing the file system. So, accessing the file system is pretty much Xamarin provides the same, does it for you, and provides the same way of doing it for iOS and Android. But Windows Phone uses a slightly different way of storing information. So that's a prime example where a large part of it's going to basically be common across all the platforms, but you're going to have some of it which is specific to Windows Phone and specific to Android and iOS, and you could basically put all of that in here, and basically put the platforms, break out the platform specific stuff, but control it using these compilation switches in this root shared library, so that when you come to use it later or somebody else is going to use it, they don't need to know what's going on in the background because you sorted that out for them. And it's just a nice way to manage that and maximize the reuse of code you get. So for example, I use this network utilities. If you look at the Android version, I called it Android network utilities. And you can see standard Android type stuff in here. We need an application context. You know, Android uses context everywhere to get almost anything about the device. None of the other platforms do anything like that. So we have that in here because it's platform specific, and we will set that. And so we can call that, and then, you know, the way that it checks a data connection, if data connections available, is very specific to Android. So this is where this goes. And if we're building for Android, we'll actually have pulled in that namespace, and so it will automatically call those libraries. Similarly, so if you look at the Windows Phone one, Windows Phone Network Utilities. Windows Phone has a really nice way of doing it. It's really easy. You just don't have to set anything up. You just have this API called Device Network Information, and it's providing it for you automatically. Awesome. Great. Don't have to do anything else. So each platform does it differently, and this is just a nice way to manage that. And then you have the very, very specific platform-specific bits, and you put those in their own projects as well. So, you know, generally speaking, it's GUI. The GUI is always going to end up in something that's very platform-specific, and there may be one or two other hardware bits that are so platform-specific that you don't want to try and unravel them in any way at all. So if you look at the Android one, you know, you've got your manifest in there. You have activities. So this is the to-do activity here. And we set up the mobile, you know, we have this mobile service client in there. We set up the table. We set up the adapter because that's what Android uses. And it basically looks like pretty much like standard Android code, but with a sort of C# twist on it. Because we're going to need that context when this is where we actually get the context, then set it up. And this is actually, if you're an Android programmer, it's always a good idea, get the application context, never the activity context, and store it statically somewhere so that everything can reference it. And that way you can use anything where you want to use something that needs context that's not in an activity or in an application-derived class. You can, it's there. You can access it. And basically, that's what it does. You know, we go through, we initialize everything, we create that client from the PCL code, set up the screen. There's a couple of things in here. There's a couple of bugs in Xamarin, Xamarin's implementation when it comes to editing text boxes, edit boxes, in that it basically gives them focus and then doesn't take the focus away, so you get a soft keyboard that you can't get rid of, which you don't get if you use the standard Android SDK. It doesn't do that. So you have to basically, if you don't want it there all the time, you have to sort of handle that. And so that's what that stuff's doing. And then you set up your adapter and link it to your list view, and it's, you know, pretty much standard stuff. We're using the async tasks. Who here knows? I guess everyone here's a C# programmer. Everyone knows C#. So async's awesome, and it allows you to basically go and do things that take time without blocking the GUI thread. And basically, we're just, you know, we're just going to be. This is just, you know, to refresh items. We check if the data connection is available, and then basically get a list of the to-do items from the database using the query that we've got in that PCL, and so that appears everywhere. That appears in all three solutions. For the platforms, And then basically we assign it to the adapter so that it can be displayed. And again, checking items, same thing for when we're checking items to delete them. Same thing for adding items. If you look at the Windows Phone version, there's a Windows Phone specific version. Obviously, completely different structure to Android. You have you have the XAML. So what is similar is the way that you specify the layout of a page, although though it's done differently. There's different things in it. They both basically use XML. Android uses XML, or in this case, it's called AXML for Android XML, and of course, Windows Phone uses XAML. And then underneath that, you have a same name, but your C# code for it. And in this case, main page. Yeah, we've called it main page. It extends a phone application page because it's for the phone. And it initializes components. We've got the same things here. We've got the mobile service collection for the items. We've got the items list. We've got a to-do table. We check if the data connection is available. It's going to be doing it in a different way, but look, the call looks exactly the same because we put it in the shared. Use the shared libraries. So we got the same interface. And again, here's insert async. It's exactly the same as before. Refresh items. We've got get incomplete items. Await common get incomplete items. In this case, we convert it to a collection. But it's basically using exactly the same calls from the PCL, from the portable class library. So I'll just run this to show you how simple it is, but just to show you that it works, and I hope it does work.
Should you update the endpoint?
Yes. Oh, by the way, the way that you handle this, you can click on one of the root libraries, the launch library, and tell it that should be the preferred library. So that's how when you debug it, you tell it, or build it, you tell it which one to build. So we can put in something and save it. And there, so it pre-populated it with first item and second item. They were already in the database, and now we've just added, which we pulled out of the service, and now we've added another one. We delete one. There we go. It's gone and deleted it, and it would have deleted it in the clients as well. But as you notice, we haven't had to worry about any JSON parsing or anything like that. You can still do that if you want. You could still, for example, instead of using the mobile client from Azure, you could write you could basically use raw HTTP clients connections and get the JSON strings yourself and do what you like with them if you found that for some reason what you wanted wasn't supported through this. But most simple things are going to be supported doing this, and especially if you're going to be doing something for a demo or you want to get something working quickly, you'll be able to get it working really quickly using Azure Mobile Services and using these Xamarin APIs, because you can basically everything that's in the table, you can just write that query. Now, Tim, can you write those queries so that they go across tables?
You could create a custom API which is supported and then write SQL statements that would return in JSON, but you can't. Actually, I don't know if you tried to do a link, if you tried to do a join and link, if that would work. that might.
Right.
I've never tried it, but the standard way is you just write a SQL statement through an API of your choice and then call that API.
Yeah. So, you know, it's been designed at least, you know, on at least this at the moment it's been designed so that you can get things back from single tables rather than, you know, query across tables and create something to come back that's got maybe data from multiple tables. If you want to start doing complex stuff like that, then you're really into the realms of actually handling it all yourself and creating your own web service APIs, you know, RESTful APIs to do that for you. But for most people, they don't need that, and so this becomes a very, very simple way of creating a server side. I mean, Tim showed how easy it is, how simple it is. It looks almost too simple to be true. And then how easy it is to deploy, and then how easy it is to access using these APIs that are provided. And then linking that in with cross-platform, you know, you can put something together really quickly for all those three platforms that are using a standard backend, and you can put something together in a week that maybe would have taken you a month to do before. So I was going to show you the Android one. I'll try and get it to deploy. But while it's trying to do it, because you know, as we all know, the Android. Here we go. Where are we? Set up a start project. Okay, and debug. Start debugging.
One tip on your start, where you hit start debugging, the little arrow.
Yep.
You can drop down and change it from there, so you don't have to right click on the solution.
Oh really? You can.
You won't be able to now because it's debugging.
Yeah.
But see that little arrow to the right of start? You can drop that down.
It was doing this fine earlier, and today it's been, while I was here, it's starting trying to synchronize packages and things, and it's for some reason it's taking it forever. It could be because we're doing this Hangout and it's eating up CPU like hell.
So selecting that drop down on the start, it changes the startup project on the fly. Is that what it does? Tim?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, selecting the start drop down, it changes the starter project on the fly before debugging. Is that what it's?
Yeah. It's the exact same thing as right clicking, but it's up by doing it there. I think it also just then launches the debugger. So it's one step instead of two.
But you can see, you know, already that Windows Phone 1 came up like that, and of course this is Android, and it's trying to package things up for the emulator, and it takes forever. And oh, it thinks it's succeeded, so we'll see if it starts up.
We'll take that compliment to rebuttal your Windows 8 projection.
I like Windows 8. I do like it. It's just, oh, did it this time. That's good. But you can, hopefully in a minute you'll be able to see that it actually works. You know, and with Visual Studio you can set your breakpoints, you can set your watch points, you can pretty much do, you know.
Can you use Genymotion? Genymotion, that's a good tool.
Genymotion.
Genymotion.
The Genymotion emulator.
For the emulator for the Android.
I don't know that.
Genymotion, it's like the open source Android emulator.
Oh right.
It's really fast.
Is it?
It's a lot faster.
I don't know. I don't think it integrates that. The Xamarin experts might be able to tell you.
Yeah, it's suggested. In the Xamarin forum, it's suggested.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
It's quick. It's
Yeah, John was using
like
last.
so much time. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously as well, if you choose an emulator which is Intel based, it's a lot faster as well. But so there you go. So we pulled it up again, and again, this is a good example. Okay, so this is the Android version. This sort of proves that we're talking to the database as well, because it populated this with what was in the database. And look, test one and second item, because we deleted the first item, the one that was called first item. So it didn't pull that because it doesn't exist anymore in the database in the service. And it's going to sit there for a while because it takes a while for the keyboard to come up.
There we go. Test 2N. Add it. Okay. So, you know, it's doing exactly the same thing, but on for Android now. And we can delete that second item.
Well, before you, go to, do you have the Windows Phone emulator still up?
No, I closed it. I could leave this running and
Yeah, can you open the Windows one again?
would I have to run it in a separate?
Yeah. Separate.
Well, you can,
Visual
if you
Studio.
stop the debugger, will the emulator stay open? I know it will.
No, the emulator will, but it stops running the program.
But then you can just relaunch it.
Hmm?
Then you should just be able to relaunch it because it's on the app. It's on
Oh,
the phone.
that's true, yeah. Put a couple of things in here. So, for example, if we try and add something, it tells you it must contain some text. And, you know, things like that, data checking if there's not a data connection, then it would actually give us a warning. And, you know, there's a few little things I put in like that. Just so if anyone looks at this, you can see the sort of things you can use that stuff for, that common type stuff for. There we go. So you're saying that if we do that there, I'll start that project.
Yeah. So then you can just click it there. I don't know if you do that, it'll just change the startup from, or if it also wants the debugger. No, I guess it only did. But now if you hit the play button, it'll debug it. Yeah.
I saw that before, but it only seems to ever have the Windows 8 phone in there.
Oh, because you've got. Oh, interesting. I think it only shows what emulators you can run. Do you have the iOS emulator on?
Not iOS, but it didn't bring up the Android ones either. There.
I thought it did when we saw
No, that's because I'd selected it as the
Okay.
So there we go. Test 1 and test 2. Because we deleted it. Sorry, what? VCL. That's just because that's the text label that we gave it, because that's what the project's called.
Can you put the Windows one and the Android one side by side on your screen?
Yeah. Oh.
You just want to make sure this is not some kind of a trick.
Next page.
Or see where.
Drag it. Click OK.
Yeah, I've got the evaluation version, by the way. I'm not paying $2,000 for for licenses. I would have liked to show you the iOS one, but the Mac I use for the build server. That's another thing, just so you know, you can't build for iOS on a PC, so you can't build for it directly using Visual Studio. You have to have a Mac that also has it on, but you actually get a Mac license with it, so they sort of, instead of getting one, you get two, so you can put it on there. So, and you basically connect to it and use that as a build server. And you connect over Wi-Fi. I think maybe, can you do Bluetooth?
No, not
Bluetooth.
Bluetooth.
Right, so it's networked. It's got to be networked over Wi-Fi or a wired connection. Yeah, so you have to have a Mac, So I use an old MacBook, you know, second-hand thing from like 2007 that I got. I put 4 gigs of memory in it. It cost like $300 or something, and works fine. You know, I wouldn't like to do lots of virtualization on it or anything like that, but just as a build server, it works absolutely fine. But unfortunately, the battery just went last week, so I'm still waiting for a battery. It keeps shutting itself down, even when it's plugged in. So I was like, damn. Oh, well.
Another thing about Xamarin licenses is each license will let you install it on up to 4 different machines. Because like Dave's example, if you're using Visual Studio and you want to deploy to a Mac, that's obviously 2 machines already. You don't need to buy 2 licenses. You just need to buy 1 license and it'll cover the 2 machines.
That's what I was trying to say. I didn't say it very well. Sorry, yes.
So there's obviously tons of differences between these two, but I'm curious as to why on the Android one it says add a to-do item as filler text, but there's nothing in the Windows.
The UI is controlled separately. So the UI is not shared. What's shared is all the back-end logic of adding, reading, and that stuff.
Yeah.
So what if in the Windows one I wanted to have like light gray filler text to add it to the UI? I have the power to do that?
You would modify the XAML for the UI.
To do that. But it doesn't, I mean, again, on Android, you often, that's sort of like often seen. So it's sort of like a standard pattern that they use, and it's not a standard pattern often used on the Windows phones. So again, it's just one of those things that, you know, your Windows phone users don't expect to see that. But you could. And just the same, you know, we could have not put it in the Android one, so it looked the same. We could have put a box there. I mean, we could have tried to make these 2 things look exactly the same. Or, you know, pretty much the same. But we, you know, they wanted, when they did these, they wanted to make each one look slightly different to accentuate the differences between the UIs.
That's why you would, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you would use it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just
Exactly.
making sure.
So again, if we delete test 1, okay. We refresh this. It's been deleted from the back end. So it's working.
And it looks like a lot of code for as simple of an app, but the more complex apps you get, as Dave mentioned earlier, is where you get the power. You know, for this, it might be like, well, I've got to write the UI for each of them. I've got to write all these. You know, I still have to have a project for each, and my PCL is really small. But once you get to more complexity, where you have a lot of more business logic, that's where the power of using a tool like Xamarin comes. And of course, obviously, the ability to write C# and not have to try and learn Objective-C or Java. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I'll show you.
You still have to learn each of their own design languages. So on Windows, it's XAML, and on iOS, you can't storyboard through Xamarin, right? You can.
You can. You can. There's storyboard there, absolutely. But again, for things like storyboard, it's actually using your build the build server on the Mac to run all that for you. Just to give you an example, so this is an app that well, a sort of thing that I created, and it's got COM in it because it started life as an Android app. So I basically kept that naming convention for the libraries, but you can see that there's a huge number of projects in here, and it's about 88% code reuse across the platforms.
If you guys have been doing any reading with Xamarin at all, there's something called Xamarin Forms. That 88%, you could probably get it up to 95, even 99%. In some cases, I'd say even 100, depending on how simple it is.
But you know, you can have things like, so here's healthcare classes. So it's a business, it's a health app. You know, those classes are going to be the same across the platform. So it's automatically going to be reused and created as a PCL. You know, so once you've got all of those things, you know, you can start getting some massive reuse across your projects using this. Whereas if you were to use it in the siloed approach, you'd have to rewrite all of those in Java, in Objective-C, and in C#. You know, or you could, I guess, do them all in C++ and then compile them all into libraries and pull them in. You know, put wrappers around them for each of those platforms, and you know, use JNI for Android, and put a C# app and use what's it called? P-invoke for C#. And I think Objective-C uses P-invoke as well, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a C-based language. But using this, it's just so easy. You know, it's so easy.
What was the name of that really fast Android emulator that you guys mentioned?
Genymotion.
Oh, the Genymotion.
G-E-N-Y motion.
One word?
Yes. The thing with that though is you can't run it on a virtual machine.
VirtualBox.
Does it?
Yeah,
Because I tried to run it on my
virtual machine app.
Mac, running VMware, and then try and run Genymotion on VMware, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Do you guys know an iOS emulator that works well?
Yeah, it's only one and it's on Mac.
That's Apple. Apple doesn't allow it. That's fine.
Oh, so if we want to build an app and like see what it looks like on an iPhone.
You need it.
You gotta buy it.
Are there any websites that let you plug in?
No, I wish.
Yeah. You know, it's one of the things with Apple, they're very restrictive. You know, they're very protective of their business model. Basically, if you're going to do anything within their ecosystem, they want you to use their ecosystem to do it, and that's it. And then, you know, it's to a credit, you know, to Xamarin's credit, they persuaded them, you know, to let them get in as far as they did. But in order to do that, they had to be very strict about how, you know, about building, you know, what you require to build for those devices.
Yeah. If I wanted to build an app to reach all the platforms, that's kind of unfortunate because I would want to definitely reach the Apple audience because every time I'm riding the buses and the trains, I look around and everybody has an iPhone.
That's in America, though. I mean,
Well, it's in America, but actually it's strange. I was at a concert a few months ago where I looked around, and every single person taking a picture there had an Android.
really?
So I think you're saying, you know, I think what we're saying is that the demographic, we're saying very distinct demographics. You know, if you're looking at people, you know, kids, if you're looking for anybody from the age of, you know, under the age of 24, you're seeing you know, Android dominates that space because they're not technophobes. They love technology. They're not scared of it. They love what they can do on an Android because they can do more on it and they appreciate it. And they get more for their money. Whereas if you're looking at, you know, professionals in their 30s, they're all predominantly dominated. That demographic's predominantly dominated by iPhone because they were, you know, early adopters. A lot of them aren't necessarily that comfortable. They're okay with technology, but, you know, they're not that comfortable with it, and they can afford it. So that's, you know, an easy thing for them. So, you know, it's sort of, I always tell people, you look at your target. If you're going to develop an app, look at your target audience. Look at what your market wants, and then go for that. Just because you like Android doesn't mean that your target audience is going to be using Android, or just because you like iPhone doesn't mean your target market, you know, likes iPhone. So, you know, but generally speaking, in the States, you know, the way things are, you know, you really need both.
Just to add to that, you also have to remember that, like, when you release an app on the store, it's going to be global. So you might have an audience here that you might be thinking of, and you might think, oh, it's going to be iPhone for sure. Then you release both, and then you see that Android has like 5 times the downloads that iOS does. So just remember that there's a global audience.
How easy is it to do localization with Xamarin?
As easy as it is on the other platforms. I mean, I've seen a couple of. I've seen some strategies out there to try and sort of unify the approach.
I guess because it's still the design language you're localizing, so that's.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 ways of doing localization. If you really, if you were going to do a lot of international apps and it was worthwhile, then it would be worth you effectively creating your own localization classes that would populate the platform-specific ones. Okay, but you know, that's quite a lot of work because you basically have to do your own XML parsing. You know, you create one table for everything, one XML file for everything, and then parse that, and then populate everything else dynamically. I mean, it would have the advantage that it would be that you could download new localizations into your app without having to re-release it. It wouldn't have to be static, it would be dynamic, but it would be quite a lot of work to do that. I have seen a couple of examples of how that can be done, but it seems to be, I haven't seen one that seems to have been done really properly, and I think it'll be quite a lot of work. Mind you, hey, if that's something someone could do and post it to the Xamarin store and probably make a bit of money out of it.
What exactly do you mean by localization?
Localization is making it so you're, if it says, hello, welcome to my app, it's going to say, hola, welcome to my app. You know, it's going to, all the wording, all the languages are changing.
Yeah, so it changes the languages, changes the, you know, the way that dates are displayed or times displayed.
Yeah, changes the currency, changes, you know, the period, .00 instead of comma, .00, and all of the different.
But that's based off of what you set your phone to, or where you.
As a developer, you have to read the setting and then modify, pull in set the proper labels accordingly. And
again, I don't know about Windows Phone and iPhone, but in Android, you can do what you want. So although that's the recommended way of doing it, you could have a list of supported localizations, and then, you know, and that's not actually a bad thing, because, you know, you might have say have a I don't know, you know, a market in Madagascar, and guess what? There's probably not a localization built in. You know, most of the people in Madagascar are going to have phones that don't have that. It's going to be English or something, but you could decide, no, I'm gonna do something in their language, and support that, you know, and give it as a localization option that you set from, you know, within your GUI. So you can do that, but generally speaking, you should just take whatever the phone's set to. That's the established practice.
Awesome.
Any questions? It's a bit late, but I know we're all tired.
A lot of information.
It's a lot of information. Go play with it. Go, you know, go play with Azure. Go play with the free version of Xamarin, and seriously, you'll find that very quickly you can start doing things that you thought were difficult.
Do you recommend a learning resource for us to go look up in our own time for Xamarin?
For Xamarin, yeah, go to Xamarin's website,
What is it?
Xamarin.com.
Okay.
And there's loads and loads. They have a lot of information there.
I think there's some Pluralsight courses on it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, there's always Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I got to say the Xamarin documentation is okay, but it's a little short, especially when you start getting into some complex and esoteric stuff. And by the way, just so everyone know, if anyone's thinking of going down this route, it's not an excuse. It's not that you don't have to understand the APIs, platform APIs, or the philosophy, like the life cycle and everything. You still need to get your head around those for each of the platforms. It just means you don't have to write lots of code and learn Objective-C and all those, you know, all those other things. But you still have to figure out, you know, Android uses activities. If you don't know what activity life cycles are doing, then you're going to get into problems pretty quickly. So, you know, it's not that it doesn't abstract that away from you. But then none of it's difficult. It's just a bit of a pain, you know. Once you get used to it, you get used to it.
Thanks, David.
Anyway, thanks. Thank you, everyone. Sorry it took so long. Thank you, Tim.